Hi, I'm Christina, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to do a book and movie review and comparison of Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. So this book was first published in 2018 and the movie was released this year in 2022. Now, I read the book in 2020 and I absolutely loved it. It was one of the best books that I read that year. Now, it did take me a little bit of time to get into it. I was a bit unsure in the beginning if I actually liked it, but I stuck with it and I'm so glad that I did because I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I just thought it was a really good book. So I was very much looking forward to the film adaptation and seeing it on the big screen. And I'm just going to talk about some of the comparisons and some of the similarities. So I think the main comparison between the two is the chronology of the story itself. So in the book, we meet Kaya as she is a child, as she is a young girl, and then we see her grow up over time, and then we find out that she is on trial for murder. And at this stage, I feel like I was very much connected with Kaya. I'd grown up with her on the page. I'd seen her from a little kid to a young woman, and I was very much connected to her as a character. Whereas in the movie, we find out that Kaya is on trial for murder within the first few minutes of the film opening. And at that stage, you don't really have any connection at all with Kaya. You don't know anything about her. And obviously then the connection is developed throughout the rest of the film. Now, I do understand why they have changed the chronology for the film, because I definitely think it makes for a much more gripping opening of a movie to have your main character on trial for murder immediately, rather than, spending half an hour, 45 minutes of screen time watching her as a little girl and watching her grow up. But having said that, I do think that you miss a little bit of something of watching Kaya as a child and watch her turning into a teenager and a young woman just before you actually know the major mystery part. So in here, I kind of felt that it was a historical fiction, contemporary kind of book, and it wasn't until much further on that it kind of turned into a little bit of a mystery. At the heart of the story is a mystery of who killed this man. Was it Kaya? Was it an accident? Was it somebody else? Whereas in the movie, it was bam, right from the beginning, somebody has been murdered and Kaya is on trial for murder. So yeah, I can definitely see why they did it, but I definitely think the way in which it was done definitely suits both mediums. I think it was so much better in the book in terms of it being a book, because you had that time to develop that relationship with her, and I understand why, yeah, we wanted this movie to be exciting from the opening. So yeah, I think that's the main difference for me between the movie and the book. So the next biggest difference between the book and the movie for me is the relationship between Kaya and her brother Jody. So in the book, the relationship between Kaya and her brother is central to her childhood. He isn't just her brother, he is her best friend too. So when he leaves, it is so much more impactful in the book, because you know that he is so important to her. He's probably the person she loves most in the world at this point. And whereas in the movie, it just kind of felt exactly the same as the departure of her older siblings. So we know that her sisters leave and then Jodie leaves. And in the book, it feels like her sisters leaves and that hurts. And then Jodie leaves and that's like a gut punch to her. It's so impactful. He's like her everything and the only thing she has left. And in the movie, it's just like her sisters leave and Jodie leaves, and it doesn't feel very impactful. It's just like everyone's slowly leaving her. Whereas in the book, I think it really packed a punch when Jodie left. And then I think the way in which the characters' relationship was developed over the story, it definitely was just more impactful overall. I feel like Jodie didn't have as much screen time as he should have done. I think in the book he is a very important character, and when he comes back, it's so exciting, and I remember being so emotional that they have been reunited, and it was just so lovely to see these characters together and to see them with their partners and, subsequently their lives. And that was just so lovely. Whereas in the movie, I think when Jodie comes back, you almost maybe don't even remember who he is. He comes back in his uniform and he's so different from the little boy who just disappeared. And I'm not sure if you hadn't read the book, you'd even really notice that it was him, and I don't think it would have the same impact on you. So yeah, I feel like the relationship between her and her brother was explored so much more in the book. And obviously you have so much more time and space to explore these relationships, but as it is one of her main relationships that underpins her whole childhood, and it's just one of her main relationships of her formative years. I think it would have been nice if we could have included more of that in the movie, whereas the movie seemed much more focused on the murder mystery itself and on the actual trial and, you know, the death and murder of the character, whereas the book kind of spends a lot more time just developing Kaya as a character and just seeing her and her relationship as she grows up. So yeah, I think that was quite a big difference as well. So in a similar vein, I think the relationship that Kaya has with Jumpin and Mabel is explored so much more thoroughly in the book, and you just get to know those two characters so much better in the book. Now, having said that, I did still think the relationship with those two on the screen was really good. I just think maybe we could have had a little bit more of them. So similar as having a little bit more of Jodie, I definitely think we could have had a little bit more of Jumpin and Mabel. I think in the book, they kind of felt like her adopted parents, if you will. They kind of feel like her paternal and maternal figures, and they're the ones that kind of help guide her through her early childhood when she really doesn't have anyone else, and she doesn't really have any other parental figures or any other adults she can really look up to. They really are, Jumpin and Mabel really are her kind of everything in terms of the people she can look up to, the people she can rely on. And I think that was done so well in the book, and you do really get to know those characters and you really appreciate them as people and just how much they'd taken on to help Kaya when, you know, they were just good people and they cared about her and they loved her like a daughter, basically. And I do think you had snippets of that in the movie, of course. I think the relationship between the three of them was shown really nicely. And I think the kind of final scenes with those three characters were so emotional. I absolutely brought me to tears. I thought it was really well done. And yeah, it was very emotional. It was very moving. And I thought they did it well. But I definitely think it hit me harder because I had read the book and I already knew that relationship between them all underpinning it. So I'd gone into the movie already knowing that. So I was already primed to be emotional, if you know what I mean, because I'd obviously already read it. But yeah, I do think those two could have had a slightly more central part in the story in the movie. I think that would have been so good. They were both really good actors, and I think, yeah, maybe we could have used them a little bit more, given them a little bit more screen time, because I don't think the importance of their characters was really shown as much as it could have been, which is a shame because they're so like pivotal characters to who Kaya is, and I think it would have been nice to have a little bit more of that on the movie. So conversely, Kaya has a much more developed relationship with her lawyer in the movie than she does in the book. He's a much more central character in the movie, and we don't really see any of that in the book. So that was a kind of interesting addition and something they've done a little bit differently. In terms of emotions in general, I actually think the movie was more hard-hitting for me than the book. So as I was watching the movie, I cried multiple times, probably on like 3 or 4 separate occasions. Whereas on the book, I actually didn't cry at all, which is a little bit surprising on reflection. Although I do think it's perhaps not a fair comparison. As I just said previously, I went into the movie already feeling the connection to the characters, already knowing the story, and I think those emotions kind of underpinned it for me. So when I did see it play out on the big screen, I was much more primed to be emotional, if that makes sense, because I just kind of knew what was coming. But at the same time, I did think it was very moving at times. It was very impactful. I thought it was filmed really well, and so many of the characters were developed so well, and some of those kind of really hard-hitting scenes, they really got me. I definitely think the final few minutes of the film were a lot more hard-hitting than the final pages of the book, and I do think that probably is just because it's so visual and you're just sitting there and absorbing it, and it really did hit me hard, I have to say. Those final few minutes of the movie were very emotional, very poignant. I thought they were excellent. So the final pages of the book were great too, but I do think it just had a bit more of an extra punch in the movie than it did in the book. And it was kind of gut punch after gut punch in the movie. We had a few big things all happening very fast, and yeah, I thought the final scenes in the movie were done so well. It was very, very emotional, and I think lots of people in the cinema with me were very emotional too. I think there was quite a few tears. So yeah, I do think it was very hard hitting, and that came across so well on the big screen, and they did that really, really well. So in terms of the pacing, I think the book is much more slow paced than the movie, and I think the movie is much more fast paced than the book. And I think that really ties in with the change of the chronology that I mentioned earlier. I think that really does affect the pacing. And in terms of how the story is driven, I think the book is much more character driven, and I think the movie is much more plot driven. And that really is with the murder trial kind of being central to the story in the movie, whereas it isn't really central to the story in the book. I think it's more of a side story, if you will. It isn't the kind of central focus of the story as it is in the movie. So in terms of the directing by Reese Witherspoon, I thought it was a wonderful job. Obviously, this was one of Reese book club picks, and then it was obviously produced into her movie with the Hello Sunshine production. And yeah, I thought it was done really, really well. I normally do enjoy the Reese Witherspoon adaptations, and this one definitely didn't disappoint. I thought it was excellent. It's everything I kind of hoped it would be, and more, because I enjoyed the book so much. I was going into the movie hoping it was going to be wonderful, of course, but wondering if it is going to quite capture the magic of the book. And I think it absolutely does. The magic definitely comes across on screen. And in terms of the casting, I think Daisy Edgar-Jones was absolutely perfect as Kaya. She was just as I imagined her, as I imagine how she would be in the book. She was a perfect casting for it. She looks just exactly how I pictured Kaya, and I thought the way in which she portrayed her with her mannerisms and just everything else, it just worked really, really well. And I could absolutely agree that, you know, Kaya on the page 100% transforms to Daisy Edgar-Jones on the screen. So in terms of maintaining the integrity of the story, I think they did an excellent job. Everything that happened in the movie did feel very true to what was portrayed in the book. I think the cinematography itself was absolutely wonderful. I think the way in which the marsh was captured was excellent, and I think the marsh itself was described so beautifully on the page, and I think they really brought that to life on the big screen, and I think it works so well. I think the actual setting of the marsh in the book, it was done so well, and then the way it was portrayed on the screen was excellent too. They really kind of gave you that kind of atmosphere of being in Carolina and being in, you know, the south of America and with the marsh, and just it all felt very realistic. It's exactly the way in which she described the marsh in the book and the way they showed it. It was exactly how I had imagined it. So I think they did a really, really good job of that. So in terms of the music choices, I have to mention the song Carolina by Taylor Swift. I heard the song prior to the release of the movie, and when I first heard it, I thought it perfectly captured the feel of the story and the essence of Kaya as a character. And I don't think they could have been a more perfect pairing of a song to this movie. I think Taylor Swift's lyrics were absolutely perfect, and it just felt true to the story and true to the book. It just kind of added a whole other layer, and I thought it worked really, really well. Now, I am a Taylor Swift fan in general, so I'm probably a little bit biased, but I did think it just suited this movie so well, and the way in which it kind of mirrored the marsh and what you could visually see on the screen, I thought it was a brilliant pairing. Now, I have to admit that it is rare for me to love a movie adaptation of a book that I love, because oftentimes the movie just seems to pale in comparison to the book, but that was absolutely not the case here. I thought the movie was absolutely wonderful, and I thought the book was absolutely wonderful too, and I think I enjoyed them both equally. I think whichever way you choose to consume this story, I think you will enjoy it, and I would highly recommend both. So I think you'll have a wonderful reading experience if you do choose to read it, and I think you'll have a wonderful viewing experience if you choose to watch the movie. Now, I would obviously recommend that you do both because I think they're both excellent, and yeah, I would give the movie 5 stars and I gave the book 5 stars, and I think they were both really, really good. Still one of my favourite books, and it's definitely one of the best films that I've watched this year. It's up there. It's definitely the best movie that I've seen at the cinema, and it's definitely one of the best movies that I've seen this year. In terms of movies that have been released this year, there hasn't been many, but it's absolutely my favourite. It's definitely my favourite movie release of 2022. There's absolutely no comparison. So yeah, those were my thoughts on the movie and the book. If you have watched the movie or read the book, I would love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do like the video if you've liked it, and please do subscribe if you'd like to see more of me talking about books. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.